Good morning. Hi, I'm Brad Green. I'm an engineering director at Google, and I manage the Angular team. I want to ask, how many of you have been in the Angular community for less than a year? Just show me your hands. Oh, great, awesome. Thank you so much. And for everyone who didn't raise your hand, thank you for coming with us on this journey for so long. It's wonderful to have you. Before I start and get into some serious content, I want to make all of you a little bit of an insider into how Angular started and why we do the things we do and how we all get to be here today. When I started at Google, one of the first projects I got to work on was Gmail. It was pretty cool. I came in 2008 at a time when Gmail had some problems, and it was actually up to me. I was charged with helping to solve some of these problems. Namely, we had not shipped a new version of Gmail for 6 months. Part of the problem was that we had really low test coverage. We couldn't make a stable build. And I remember getting into an argument with the tech lead. His name was John, and by the way, he's a fine guy. But we were getting into it. And I remember, I think I got to the point where I might have screamed at him, we need to get in there and just write some tests. And the thing he told me next made me stop. Because he said, how? And he looked totally defeated, and I felt like a jerk. Because what we realized then was that it was just infrastructurally hard to build tests the way we had written Gmail. We spent the next year or so digging out, and we're fine now. We can release Gmail multiple times a week, every day if we want. But I'm telling you this story because this stayed with me. And by the way, Mishko was on the team with me. And this kind of set our tone for what we wanted to do and thinking that we could help more by providing a lot of infrastructure to support all of you in building rich applications. And so that's what we do in Angular today, where we have an ecosystem that we provide that has everything that you know and love in the framework with dependency injection and change detection and declarative templates, but far broader than that, where we have forms and animations and IETNN and a rich suite of components and a framework for building those components. And we do this all so that you don't have to do this work, so that you can build on top of it and not have to run into the problems of not having the proper infrastructure. We spend a lot of time on this. We spend a lot of time making sure all of these pieces work together as one unit. One of the other things we spend a lot of time on is making sure that you can come along with us to the latest version. And so that when we release the next version, which is going to be Angular version 8, we're already in the release candidate phase, that you can just go to update.angular.io, plug in which version you're coming from, you get some simple instructions on how to do it. Most of the work actually happens inside the CLI when you type ng-update and our packages. We're able to do this because it's actually our responsibility on the Angular team to update every application at Google that uses Angular. So we go through all of this with the apps at Google that use Angular, and then we bake this into this ng-update command for you to use. We've been working at this since version 6, but we got some really good validation that we're on the right track from some of our friends at Air France and KLM, where they wrote this article about, hey, how we upgraded a website with 500 million annual users to Angular 7 in less than a day, and how we're going to do it even faster in Angular 8. This is pretty cool. They had this wonderful quote in here, which I'll just read to you. It's that we believe that the best measure of a healthy code base and development team is the time it takes from wanting a change to the time it is developed and deployed into production. Or in other words, my goodness, how well I'm doing as an eng team is measured by how quick I can get my ideas out into production. And they've actually measured this for themselves. And in particular, they've measured how long it took to do it for upgrading from Angular from one version to another. And they graphed it for us. Where going from version 2 to 4 was a month. 4 to 5 and 5 to 6, just 2 weeks. And going to Angular 7, just a day. That's pretty cool. Now, it's not all stuff we've done in the ng-update command. It's a bunch of things that they've done to prepare, to make sure that they can take advantage of our new releases every 6 months. And that's why we give you a consistent release schedule. One of the other things that might not be obvious that we spend a lot of time on is supporting the community and making it something that we love to be a part of, and that's why we're here this week with you. Our best measure of growth for the Angular community is number of people coming to our site, angular.io. And in 2018, we grew more than 50% to 1.5 million 30-day actives on that site. More than how many people are coming to our website, though, we actually care about what the organizers started to talk about, which is how we all treat each other in this community. I want to tell you a story. About 3 years ago, I was making dinner, cooking in the kitchen. My daughter comes in, and she has a burning question. And she says, "Daddy, when you were a kid, did you pick your nose?" And so I was a little conflicted. Because on one hand, I want to tell her the truth, but on the other hand, I want to set her up for success in life. And so I say, "Hey, you know, sweetie, yes, as a kid, I did pick my nose. But what I've learned is that it's important to use a tissue instead because it's sanitary, and I'm not going to offend anybody by picking my nose in public." But she has another question. She says, "Daddy, when you were a kid and you picked your boogers, did you eat your boogers?" So again, I'm a little conflicted. But again, I said, "Yeah, baby, I probably did eat my boogers as a kid. But I've learned it's better to use a tissue, and that's what I want you to do." I thought we were done, but she has another question. "Daddy, do you want to see me eat my boogers?" No? "Baby, use a tissue." She's progressed. She's now 3 years older and is into burping contests. I'm telling you this story because what she was really asking is, what's the right way for me to behave? What's the acceptable way for me to behave in this world? And that's what I want to spend just a little bit of time thinking about. The organizer spent some really good time explaining the code of conduct, which is kind of like the backstop for bad behavior, but that's not what we're after. If you trust me, I want you to go through a little exercise with me, and it is safe here. If you would, maybe close your eyes, because we're going to imagine something. Imagine you come to the Angular community for the first time. And imagine that because of who you are, your race, your gender, the way you talk, because you're new, you get rejected or you get made to feel uncomfortable. How would you feel? Maybe angry? Maybe wronged? I would. Let's imagine the other thing, though. Let's imagine that you come to the Angular community, you come to a conference like this one, you come to an online forum, you come to a meetup, and no matter who you are, no matter what your race is, how new you are, what your gender is, anything else about you, you get supported. You get welcomed, and you get all the help you need to grow. And go ahead and open your eyes, but let's keep imagining, what if you were one of these people who got welcomed, and as you grew in expertise and connections in the community, you were able to welcome that next set of folks coming in? How would that feel? Pretty good. And that's what we're after. And largely, that's what we see. That's what we're so excited to be here with you about. There's a couple things we can do, though, to improve our abilities to welcome people. And there's some good talks here. I'll talk about a couple of them. Number one, Katarina's going to talk tomorrow, and her speech is called "It's Just a Compliment After All." And she's going to help inoculate us against making statements that would make women feel uncomfortable inadvertently. It's easy to do if you don't know, and it's super easy to avoid if you do know. And then more on why would I want to be supporting a community? Why do I want to be involved? Go see Melina's talk on Friday. She's going to talk about how tech communities can change your life. It's like, what's in it for me? There's a lot. Igor is also going to talk more about our values and ways that we want to engage more with all of you folks later. But definitely go check these 2 talks out. All right. I want to talk about our latest release now, Angular version 8. We're in the release candidate phase, and we've been in release candidate for about a week. We usually give ourselves 4 weeks, like a month, to bake out any of the final bugs once we think we're at release candidate. So we're headed for a version 8 final at the end of May. And then, this will be important later, we do releases every 6 months. So version 9 is going to be coming in Q4. Let's talk through what we've done in version 8. There's a lot more than we thought we would have. Number 1, you can try it today in the release candidate, and we hope you do. You can just go to update.angular.io for the instructions on how to do it. And you can get all the docs at next.angular.io. Once version 8 becomes the stable version, it's just going to be the docs at Angular.io at that point. Big feature for version 8. You can make your apps, all of your apps right now, quite a bit smaller with this new feature called differential loading. The way it works is this. We have old browsers, legacy browsers, that need big sets of polyfills, and they can only really handle ES5 syntax. And so what we're going to do with differential loading is we create 2 bundles, one for the old legacy browsers, and then a minimal set of polyfills, and using the modern JavaScript syntax, which is actually much smaller, that gets served to the evergreen browsers. The cool thing about this is there's no server config to change. This happens all in the client request, so there's really no reason not to use it. One bonus is that if you use this, you're also set up to work well with the search engines if you care about SEO. We tried this out on many different apps. One of them that we maintain a lot, or we do a lot with, is our Angular.io site. We saved about 41K here. And from trying it out in other applications, we think you're going to save somewhere between 7 and 20%. It's a pretty good deal. Woo! Definitely something to try once you get home. A ton of other features came in version 8. Number 1, we're extending the ability for you to customize the CLI with a feature called Builders, where last year with schematics, we gave you the ability to change the files that we output. Now with Builders, we give you the ability to change which tools run and in which order and orchestrate it yourself. We have a set of features that we're starting to extend or build on top of Builders, giving you the ability to deploy your applications right from the Angular CLI. Today, in Minko's talk, later in this room, you'll see him demonstrate deploying from the CLI to Firebase. And we have folks from the Azure team working on deploy to Azure, and many other folks just starting. Minko will talk more about it later today. We added support in the CLI for web workers, so you can easily move some of the work that you're doing out of the main UI thread into a separate worker thread, so it can never interrupt what the user's doing. And we're actually using this on Angular.io ourselves to move the search indexing for the online searching off into a worker thread so that it can't interrupt what the users are doing. We've made many service worker improvements, so if you're building progressive web apps on Angular, you're going to have a better time with a better set of APIs. We've standardized the way we do lazy loading, where today in Angular 7, you do lazy loading in the router through a special string format that we invented. And in version 8 and going forward, you're going to use the standard browser import mechanism. The big important thing about this is that now, instead of us having to have a special Angular version of Webpack or Rollup or any of these other tools, these tools now all just understand the way we need to do code splitting, and you can use it out of the box without waiting for us to build a special plugin. We're still helping with folks who need to migrate from AngularJS to Angular, and we've built a compatibility layer for the router, where the $ location service in AngularJS, we now emulate it inside Angular, so that if you're doing a migration, you can use only the Angular router, and it can do everything that the old AngularJS router did. We're working on better IDE completions, and we've built a better d.ts rollup so that the IDEs can actually give you better information. And then we've also built a simplified getting started guide so that if you have friends or coworkers or other people who need to learn Angular, we've got a much easier way to do it. We've got links for all of these things in the speaker notes, and we're going to give you a link to the slide deck at the end. That's the main stuff that is completely done. We have a couple big projects that you've probably heard before if you've been to one of our talks that are still a bit of a work in progress, but that some of us should be using today. And these are Basil for doing builds and Ivy, our new rendering engine. Let's start with Basil. Basil is the core of the build system at Google. We've been using it for over 12 years, and we're now trying to bring it to the outside world. You can think of this as the thing that orchestrates how all my tools run, how TypeScript and Webpack and Rollup and Sass and all of these things get run to make them run as efficiently in parallel and as distributed as possible. In the CLI today, we do a reasonable job of building, but there are headroom limits. And we've partnered with the Basil team to remove those limits in the CLI. We're doing this because there's this shift that's happening where it used to be that most of the logic that I would write for my applications was on the server side, in Java or C# or some other language. More of it's moving to the client because we want to build these rich, immersive experiences for people when they use our applications. And with it, the complexity comes over too. But unlike Java and C# and C++ and all these languages who have a very rich and integrated build environment, we haven't had that over on the side of JavaScript. And that's what we're trying to bring over with Basil. Some big benefits we're after. Number one is we want to have incremental build and test. So if I make a small change to the code, I should also see just a small rebuild time. We want to have the ability to do full stack tests and deployment so that if I'm building a front end and a back end separately, we want them actually now to be able to live together in a single build so I can guarantee my deployments are going to work together. And then we want to be able to scale better by moving those builds and tests out from my developer desktop onto the cloud so they can run in parallel and reuse build artifacts so that my builds can go quicker. There's a bunch of folks who are already taking advantage of this. Of course, Google. We've used it across all of our development environments. Everybody at Google uses this to build what we build. But it hasn't yet worked in the world you live in outside of our environment. But we're starting to see it. There's actually a team here in Salt Lake City named Lucidchart. Probably some of you have used it. They built a beautiful diagramming tool in Angular on the front end with Scala on the back end. And now they're able to release these front end and back end builds together as a tested whole. Another example, LogicOcean is a startup in China. And they're seeing much faster builds by just reusing the build artifacts and not having to rebuild things that have already been built. And then another one is actually us on the Angular team. If you remember this chart of all of the products that we build, this is something that we have to guarantee to you where everything works together. They can't be their own separate repos and then us having to do every permutation of testing together to make sure that they're working. This drove us to start putting them into a monorepo, into a single location. But without Basil, we're not going to get the benefits of being able to run in parallel and at scale with the reliability that we want. We've moved most of Angular to Basil, and now we're starting to parallelize it by running it in the cloud on multiple machines. We've seen our CI, the parts that are written in Basil, actually go from about an hour down to just 7.5 minutes. Just 7.5 minutes. This is dramatically impactful for our ability to get versions of Angular out as fast as we want. Imagine having to wait 60 minutes if I had to fix a typo. Where we are today is that you can use Basil in the CLI in version 8. And we've got a new website at basil.angular.io where you can find out more. It's not going to be for everyone right now. We're working towards that. There are still a couple of rough edges. But if you want to get some of the scalability benefits that we've been getting on the Angular team and at some of these other companies, definitely check it out. And definitely check out Alex Eagle's talk. Alex is the lead for the CLI team. He's been working on the Basil problem for a number of years. And he's going to tell you many more details about where we are and how to get started. We also have the CLI team and members from the Basil team here at ng-conf 3 different times. Today from 10 a.m. till 1:30, Thursday from 1 to 3, and Friday from 10 to 1:30. You can go talk to them and see how to get started. Ivy renderer. If you haven't heard about it, this is our rewrite of our rendering engine inside Angular. And we have a bunch of different goals for this. Number one, we want to make it possible for you to build smaller apps, much smaller. We want to give you faster compilation, and like Basil, if you make a small change, we want to have a proportionally small rebuild time so that you can build any size application. We want to give you simpler debugging because debugging is a fact of life and it should be an easy task. We want to do improved type checking. There's parts of our templates in Angular today that we don't yet type check. And most importantly, we want it to be backwards compatible so that if there's any changes we have to make, we either automate them or they're minimal so that everybody can come along on the journey. In version 8, this is the thing that we've spent the most time on. So let's see how we are. You can actually try Ivy today in Angular version 8. You can create new apps by just setting the -- enable Ivy flag. If you want to port your existing application on top of Ivy, we've got some simple instructions here at next.angular.io/guide/Ivy. Well, what are you going to get? We've been working on backwards compatibility for a long time. Inside Google, we have hundreds of applications that use Angular. And we're now passing 97% of their test suites. So we're down to the very long tail. This represents hundreds of thousands of tests. So we're pretty confident it's going to work for a lot of you already. Where we think it's not going to work, though, and we need some help, is in all of the libraries that folks use outside Google that we don't use and we don't have exposure to. So if you're a team that has very few dependencies, we think you could probably have a good time on Ivy, and we'd love you to start using it. If you've got many dependencies, we think there's going to be problems. If you can, we'd love your help telling us which things we need to fix, so in the rest of the RC period and as we head towards version 9, we can fix all of those places. We have hit our simpler debugging goal. Right now in Ivy, if you turn it on, you get breakpoints in HTML. I can just go in there, and the debugger will stop in my HTML where I set the breakpoint. And I get debuggable stack traces, where I can actually walk up the stack trace and see my code in a very human-readable way. This is pretty cool. Smaller was one of our goals. I'll preview, we're not there yet. Today in the View engine, which is the name for our current renderer, if you do a Hello World application, you get about 151 kilobytes, minified but not compressed. If you turn on the differential loading, you shave off a bit. And if you use Ivy, you shave off a bit more. And Ivy plus differential, it's starting to look pretty good. And to be clear, our recommendation for everyone is certainly using what you're using today with the differential loading. And we need help testing the Ivy in the compatible mode with the differential serving. Notice I didn't say try anything without differential serving. You should definitely use it. But this is not where we're headed. Last year, we made some charts of where we want to go, because we want to make very small applications possible. And if you turn on Ivy with an experimental Bootstrap API that we have, it's not ready yet, you get some very small builds. And right now, it's about 14K, again, uncompressed. This would be for thrill seekers. We're not going to document it, but you think of it as an Easter egg. Go hunt for it. There are a couple of bonuses that we were able to achieve in Ivy. They weren't part of our original goals, but as we were developing Ivy on the new, better architecture, we found we could achieve some other things. Number one is we are seeing lower memory requirements, and then in different scenarios, it's different amounts, but we have an application simulation of a 100 by 100 grid where it's 30% down, and in the material unit test, it's 91% down. We're seeing much faster tests. Our Angular framework tests are 38% faster, and the material unit tests are 80% faster. We've also been able to fix a bunch of long-standing bugs, things that are probably annoying you today. There are cases where change detection runs too often, where class bindings override other classes. I've made a list in the speaker's notes. There's some good stuff for you to find there. So where did we get to? In Ivy today, in version 8, yes, on simpler debugging, backwards compatible, lower member requirements, faster tests, and a bunch of bug fixes. We hope a bunch of you try it. There are some things that we still need to do for version 9. We still need to reach our overall size goal, need to get to the faster compilation goal, and the improved type checking. But this is where we're going. And in version 9, our big goals are, number 1, to make Ivy the default. Make Ivy the default for everybody so everyone gets to take advantage of these benefits. And number 2, to make sure that Basil in the CLI is fully featured and scalable, again, so that everybody can take advantage of it. If you want to hear more about what we're thinking of for version 9, you should definitely go to Friday morning's keynote with Mishko and Steven, where they're going to deep dive into all of that. I'd now like to bring Igor Minar up on stage, where he's going to talk more about our motivations and design considerations for Angular, and how we want to work more with everyone, all of you in the community. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Igor. I'm a tech lead on the Angular project. And as Brad mentioned, one of the things I would like to share with you is some of the design considerations that go into making Angular, and also how we would like the Angular community to be part of this. One consideration that shouldn't be a surprise to you by now is compatible. We want Angular to be compatible so that you can rely on it. We want to build this successful ecosystem that people can rely on. Because if we learned anything from the AngularJS to Angular version 2 adventure, it's that we don't want to leave people behind. Leaving people behind is not fun. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for us. And we don't want to do this ever again. And it was actually quite funny when recently we had a meeting where all the leads on the Angular working, and we're discussing the user experience or developer experience developers will have when they try to play with Ivy in version 8 RC. And we discussed in great details, what it's going to look like, what is it that they will see, is it going to be good, what are going to be the concerns. And about 20 minutes in, somebody in the room said, hey, wait a minute, are we really spending this much time discussing developer experience for an opt-in preview for technology that is not going to be fully ready until much later in this year? And yes, we have. I'm very proud of the team because it took a big mind shift to get there. But with this mind shift, we can provide a much better experience for all of you. But being just stable is not good enough. The web is changing, the user expectations are changing, the developer experiences are also changing. We need to keep up. We need to make sure that Angular doesn't stay behind and become stagnant. This is why we want the Angular ecosystem to be malleable and ever-evolving, so that you can rely on it and you can know that all of the new things that are coming for the web will be available and supported by Angular. Every time we talk about a new feature, one of the considerations is scale. And when we talk about scale, it's not just how to scale up, but also how to scale down. Let me show you what I mean. This is a graph I drew for a bunch of people on our team, where I'm trying to capture the number of users supported by a single application on the y-axis, and the number of applications of this kind on the x-axis. So there is very few applications that support multiple billions of users out there. We don't have a whole lot of them. It's like Gmail, Facebook, and so on. But as the number of users that interact with those applications drop, there is an increasing number of applications that are built of that size. Those are all the consumer applications, all the enterprise applications, and all the way down to the long tail of small applications that we just build for fun, or we just need a simple submission form, or we are building applications for educational purposes. When we built AngularJS many years ago, we were targeting the long tail. We were targeting the experiences where we wanted to make sure that Angular was easy to get started with, and you can be successful very quickly and build small applications. However, as AngularJS became more and more successful, we started building bigger and bigger applications. And all of a sudden, we started hitting ceilings. We could not scale up anymore, especially as we were building bigger and bigger enterprise applications. This is why we decided to build Angular version 2. And this is what we thought we were building. We thought it's going to be amazing, it's going to capture everything we had with Angular JS, and much more. However, in reality, we built something like this, where Angular, especially version 2, was primarily suitable for the enterprise use cases, where you need to scale both in terms of size of the code base and number of users or number of developers collaborating on the code base. Over the years, however, through different versions of Angular, we incrementally increased the range. We were both working on scaling up and scaling down. And going forward, we have several efforts that extend the range further. With Angular Ivy, which is currently planned for version 9, we would like to capture the long tail, especially with Ivy in combination with Elements. It's perfectly suitable for use cases where you don't need a single-page application. You're just building something much smaller than that. Additionally, we have a project that we haven't discussed much in public. We call it Angular Photon. This is a project that is focused on making sure that Angular can also scale up and allow us to build bigger and bigger applications. There are going to be several talks that will go much more in detail into these two efforts. Manfred is going to do a talk on Elements and Ivy and how that can help with the long tail. And Rob is going to talk about how not every application has to be SPA, but he's also going to cover some of the scaling up efforts that we have in works in Angular. If you look at this graph, one thing that you will see is there is still space that is not covered. And that is the space where you really need technologies that scale up and allow you to build ginormous applications. This is not where Angular is today yet. We would love to be there. There are some people that are exploring this and are successful in certain use cases, but this is not the sweet spot for Angular yet. However, approximately a year ago, we got a new sibling team at Google. And it's this team that is focused specifically on this segment. They build the technologies and the designs that support the biggest applications at Google. Over the several past months, we've been collaborating, and the collaborations were focused primarily on exploring whether it would be feasible to take some of these technologies and make them accessible to the open source community in the future. We'll update you in the future once we have things to share. But in the meantime, I would like to actually welcome the team here, because we have several of them here. They wanted to know what Angular is about. They are not part of the Angular community yet, but they would like to understand us better. So if you do bump into them, please extend them extra kindness so that they get to feel what the Angular magic is all about. Thank you. This brings us to another design consideration, which is Angular is very people-oriented. I was going to talk about this, but Stephanie did a much better job interviewing lots of people. We played this documentary before many people came into the room, so I encourage you to go online and watch it. It's a documentary about Angular community, and it talks about our values and how we work. And what I like about it the most is that it captures the essence, which is we are here to enable creations of applications that people love to use. And these applications should be built by developers that love to build them in a community that is welcoming. And as a community, we are primarily living in the open source world. Most of the work happens on GitHub, and this is where a lot of the open source communication and engagement happens. A lot of our team is actually sourced from the external community, from the open source world. And many people don't know that while we build everything on GitHub, we have this very elaborate continuous integration story with Google, where as we merge changes to the master branch on GitHub, we almost immediately bring it to Google, where it's available to all of the developers that use Angular within a few minutes or hours. This allows us to get a very quick feedback loop on how things are working, and if we are breaking anything or if we are making things better or worse. This allows us to extend higher quality assurance to the releases that we eventually make and ship to the open source community. So yes, Google runs on the head of Angular, and it's kind of insane. I don't have time to talk about it here, but if you are interested in this, I'm happy to talk about it in the hallway, so just grab me. One of the things that came out of this kind of process where Angular team works on the boundaries between Google and the open source is that Angular became this conduit for exchange of information, but also technologies between Google and open source. And a good example of this, there are actually two good examples. One is Ivy. Ivy was conceived outside of Google. It was conceived in the open source community, was pitched to the Angular team. We really liked it. And we worked on this project for, at this point, a year and a half, or maybe even more. And in a few weeks, it's going to have a major impact on Google. On the other hand, we have a technology like Basil that is a core part of how Google works. And the Angular team is collaborating with the Basil team to take this very unique and scalable technology and make it accessible to the web development in the open source world. If you look behind the curtain, what you'll see that there is 43 or so amazing people that make up the Angular team. And these people are organized into 5 subteams. 2 are cross-cutting, DevRel and documentation, and then 3 are product-oriented, the tooling, framework, and components. And it's this team that creates the structure that supports everything we do in the Angular community. I draw this pyramid, and for the longest time, I didn't want to make Googler special, but there is one thing that does make Googler special when it comes to building Angular, which is they have access to the internal systems, to the source repository. They're able to support and debug internal applications, and this makes them unique. Other than that, everybody else who's collaborating on Angular, and about half of the team is non-Googlers, have equal rights and are influential in building Angular. One of the things that has been concerned to me for a long time is that the bottom of the pyramid, which is the community contributions, the issues, PRs, keeps on growing much faster than the top of the pyramid. And if you saw some of the graphs that Brad shared, you understand my concern. How to deal with the growth of the community in a way where the team is not overburdened, and we're still able to provide you with excellent support. This is why a couple of months ago, we kicked off a new program called Angular Collaborators. This is a program that is focused on enabling Angular development to scale through open source collaboration. What that essentially means is we're taking a slice from the bottom of the pyramid. We're taking the contributors to the Angular repository, picking the ones that have been the most useful, the most impactful, the ones that were the most helpful, and turning them into true collaborators with elevated privileges, inviting them to meetings, assigning them mentors, and making them part of the team. In this way, we're able to onboard people through 2 different flows. The first one is through the community, where we are trying to take the passion of individuals and turn it into an impact and make impact on the entire community. The other flow is through enterprises. We want to extend an opportunity to enterprises to invest in development of Angular in exchange for having an in-house expertise, having better support, and also having ability to inform the roadmap of the entire product. There are several goals behind this. One is the scaling. We are trying also to increase the diversity because the more people come and join the Angular team, they come from different backgrounds, and that informs our decision-making and allows us to make better decisions. We really want to engage better with the community and bring more of the community members to the team. We want to create opportunities for these community members because they deserve it. They've been doing amazing things for us for years, and we would like to highlight them. And lastly, we would like to ensure a long-term success of the project, because the more people are invested in the future of Angular, the longer the future will be. In the last month, we onboarded 9 community collaborators. These people have been the ones that were the most active, the most useful on GitHub, and were immediately able to help us. I want to highlight especially Adam, Jali, and Manfred, who had a big impact on many of the features that we shipped in version 8. And I'm looking forward to seeing big contributions from the other collaborators in the future. The plan is to onboard more people from the community and make them part of the team within 2019. We think we have a capacity for about 40 people, just so that we can scale the mentorship and provide good experience, but this is the plan. In the long run, what I would like to do is to make sure that the Angular collaborators have the prestige that the Angular GDEs have. Angular GDEs, the Google Developer Experts, is a program where we highlight the most active and the most prolific and the most impactful members of the community that are focused on developer relations and outreach to the community. The Angular Collaborators program is focused on actually building the product. And it's not just building the code, it's also about documentation, triaging of support, design, user experience research, and so on. At this point, you might be wondering, how do I join? And that's a valid question. Many people are excited when I talk about this opportunity. For now, all I can tell you is, if you're a community member, just be an awesome contributor. Help us with finding good issues, help us with sending high-quality pull requests, and help us iterate on these pull requests so that we can merge them. And we will be picking the most active ones and the most impactful ones for the next round of additions. If you are enterprise and want to invest in building Angular, please contact Devrel at Angular.io, and we'll be discussing this with you. We discussed many things that influence how we think about Angular and how to build it. We talked about compatibility, how we don't want to leave people behind. We talked about scalability, and not just scaling up, but also scaling down. We talked about how Angular is evergreen. We want to keep up with the changes in technology, with the expectations. We talked about how we are people-oriented, because losing focus of people would turn Angular into something it's not, and that would be a shame. And lastly, we talked about all the considerations we are making to make the open source collaboration successful, and how we are hoping that through open source we can actually scale our efforts even more. There are two additional considerations, and they are actually skills that I would like to highlight, and that's empathy and respect. With empathy and respect, you are able to build better products, you are able to have better relationships, you are able to build better teams and better communities. And there is no better place to start practicing these skills than at ng-conf, where all of us get together, and our goal is to make sure that not only we have good experiences, but everybody around us has great experiences. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll be around. Don't be shy and come talk to us. Thank you.